Hey YouTube, it's your girl Chic from Chic Speaks. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I have our guest back once again, the one and only AK on fire. AK, I appreciate you coming back. There are some things I want to get into, and my first thought was, hey, let's bring AK back to talk about these things because as you know, a married woman of 18 years, AK is also a married man of 20 plus years. So it's kind of refreshing to have a conversation with someone who's also married and someone who's been married longer than I have. I yet to see that happen outside of the elders in my family on my husband's side. So I do appreciate anytime he does come over and give his perspective on the state of Black love and in particular marriage, because that's what I talk about over here. I advocate marriage. I feel like the family is much stronger when there's a nuclear family, husband, wife, children, or even husband and wife, no children. But AK, go ahead and introduce the people for those of you who are tuning in for the first time. Also, AK, before I pass it on to you, got people K and spam as you come in. Please like, share, subscribe. Make sure you hit the notification bell so you know when I go live. And if there's anything that resonate with you, show your girl some love by hitting the Cash App at $speak50. But y'all, we're gonna get into some things. It's gonna be a good conversation as usual. But AK, go ahead. Go ahead. I'm passing it over to you. Tell people who AK is.
Okay, so AK is a man that's been husband, father, been married 20 plus years. Got into this YouTube thing to discuss a lot of the issues that go on in the Black community, primarily between Black men and Black women. We talk about not just relationships, communications, economics, mental health, and so forth.
Great. Thank you. Listen, y'all, fellas, ladies, we got a married man up here. He going to let you know what you need to be doing. Fellas, you want a wife. Ladies, if you want a husband, this is your guy, and I am your girl. Miss V, Veronica Farish is in the building. I definitely appreciate you for showing up. You always support, and I appreciate you letting me know my clarity is on point because listen, sis, I've been streaming. So I've been trying to get that thing right like AK, like Miss V, Veronica Farish. So I'm happy to report I have figured it out, at least that part, y'all. So y'all, we're going to get into it. I have a video that actually my husband shared with me. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with the woman, a Christian author, speaker, Amanda Pittman. So, AK, are you familiar with Christian author, speaker, Amanda Pittman?
I am not.
Okay, well then that's fine. You guys, I'm gonna share a video because sis had some jewels to drop, her and her husband, but it really resonated with me as a married woman. So I want to share this video and get into it. And those of you who are watching, please engage. Again, like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell. But please engage in the conversation and let me know your thoughts on the content tonight. So let's get into this video. Fair use.
Him. So why do you love me? Whenever being with Michael, I would ask him, so why do you love me? Whenever we're dating. And he told me, I love you because I choose to.
Woo, boy, that right there. Hold on, y'all got to understand what that was. Man, go ahead. Y'all talk, because I understand when a man says that. Go ahead.
And I thought, what do you mean?
Yeah,
you love me because you choose. Is it that hard to love me?
Got offended.
Am I that hard to love?
Got offended.
All of the older people were just shouting his praise. He's like, you get it.
You get it.
I was like, what? But it was all the older folks that were still married.
There it is.
Mm-hmm.
They got it.
Yeah.
So I didn't necessarily like it then, but I did like it when I wasn't so lovable.
God, dog, this is good.
I did like it when I get pregnant and I gain 50 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
I did like it when I chopped off all my hair. The pixie cut looked great, but when I started growing it back out, it didn't.
That in between.
And I really appreciated it when, you know what? There are times where I was a little too harsh or I was popping off a little bit. And you didn't revoke your love for me because I didn't meet your standard, right? You still loved me. And I'm like, oh, I get it. I like this kind of love because
Yes.
this kind of love is not revocable. This kind of love is constant. It's not dependent on how great I am, but it's dependent on your decision and your commitment to me.
AK, listen, when like I said, my husband shared that to me, so I know he shared it with me, so I'm like, okay, this must have resonated with him, because I recognize that, we're not always lovable, including myself. So what's your take on what Miss Amanda Pittman had to say in regards to her husband choosing to love her?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was just, it was, her response was like, her initial response was interesting because, let me back up. When I think about her initial response, it reminded me of a bit that Chris Rock did. And he talked about how men love unconditionally, but when it comes to loving a man, it comes with conditions, whether it's his ability to provide, whether it's his ability to protect. But when it comes to like women and kids, we love them unconditionally. And when a man chooses to get to become married, to become a spouse, he often chooses it for the long term, and he loves you through all of your flaws. He loves you when you're up, when you're down, your highs and lows. But oftentimes there are a number of men who don't feel like we get that same love, that same unconditional love in return.
I can see that because throughout life, you hear women have this list on, he needs to be tall, dark, handsome, rich, make this amount of money, have this type of car. And I don't hear men have those conversations because I talk with men a lot and I don't hear them lead with a list. It's really, they're heavily on the attraction, if they find that woman to be attractive and if they find her to have a good attitude. And that's kind of it, it's not, it has nothing to do with what she does as far as her career, how much money she makes, what kind of car she drives. They're heavily focused on how she makes them feel, how she makes them feel. And the rest, they're like, listen, we're good. I got you. But if you can make me feel good, you look good, you're available for me, when I want to have sex, like listen, that list is real short in comparison to women's who have a scroll, because I think almost all women at some point had this list of things, whether they had a hard copy list or in their mind what that list was. Because I know in my mind, I had a list at a young age. I've been married since I was 23. So prior to that, I had a list, which let me know when creating that list made it easier for me to identify my husband. I will say that because in my mind, I had a checklist of the things or the characteristic I wanted in a man. And I would say if I written that down, anyone who looked at it would not have found to be superficial because it actually didn't have money on it. It was heavily on just someone who loved me, respect me, who's responsible. It wasn't anything shallow. So when I think about it, it makes sense why I was able to recognize him so early on is because it was those characteristics that really made a difference, not those other things to me that kind of can change by just someone losing their job. So I do definitely believe that when men do have it harder than women when it comes to being aligned with a woman, especially if they say the men choose, but at the same time, that woman have to be receptive to what it is that you have to offer. And I think a lot of times women overlook a quality good man. I think your average woman, if they're honest with themselves, they have that one guy, maybe even two, but at least one where they felt like, man, I missed a good one. Had I known then what I know now, I would have gone ahead, given that man a chance or made that situation work. What's your thoughts on that?
No, it's true. There's a saying that sometimes people don't appreciate your presence till they experience your absence. And sometimes when you have too many choices, it can be confusing. What do they call it? The paradox of choice. You just it's very difficult for you to make a choice. You think you have all the time in the world until you don't, right? And so, and I don't know, because, well, I'll share a story with you. So I think the problem is that with women, they are beautiful. When they're young, they're beautiful, and a lot of guys are vying for their attention. And I don't know, honestly, let me back up. And I'll tell you what I tell my daughters. I tell my daughters that what you want, don't focus on the superficial things similar to yourself. I say you want a man who is ambitious. You want a man who has a good work ethic. You want a man who has integrity, right? And if you start with those three things, and also a man who has respect for women, you start with those four things, then you can't go wrong. I think the problem is when you have a lot of younger women trying to make decisions about who they want to mate, then the whole 6-figure thing, 6 feet thing comes into play, 6-figure thing comes into play. And I understand it, because part of that is just how women are wired, right? Women are wired to seek out a man who can protect and provide. And the guy who is 6 feet with the muscles is the physical embodiment of protection. And the guy who makes 6 figures, he is the financial embodiment of a protector and a provider. So I get it, and I think we briefly talked about it on the last show that we did. I can't remember. I'm sorry. If we didn't talk about it, I apologize. But where we talk about women doing pretty well now in terms of education, they're doing well now in terms of how much money they make. And so it almost seems counterintuitive as to why, a lot of women are still hypergamous and still want the guy with the 6 figures when they're making 6 figures themselves. But it's really hard. I mean, to me, I think it should be an easy decision to make for a lot of women. But I even see that with my daughters, and I have them, I talk to them and say, hey, look, you have to prioritize. I mean, you're not going to get everything on that wish list. And I think that's the difference between, between men and women. Whereas a guy, yes, he may want the Halle Berry type, right? And I'm only using Halle Berry because she was the standard of beauty back in the 90s. You may want that, but you're good with somebody who doesn't look as good as her. It's not, you don't feel like you're settling or that you've been robbed, because I hear a lot of women say, I don't want to settle. And, when I hear that, it kind of, it's kind of off-putting, because you're saying that you don't want to settle for a guy who makes $60,000 because you want a guy who makes $100,000, as if the guy who makes $60,000 or $70,000 is trash. Like I mentioned before, I had a friend who made she makes 6 figures, but she said she didn't want to settle for a guy that made $80,000, even though, if the two of them were married and you're in a $180,000 household, there's no city in America where you're not considered upper middle class. I know I was rambling a bit, so let me stop there and tell me if you follow where I'm going.
No, I completely follow you. Excuse me. Yes, we did briefly touch on that on the last show that we had, and I think the whole thing when it comes to the money aspect, it stems from what we're hearing out in the world and on the internet. Everything is heavily about what this man does, what he can do. And so it's almost like you keeping up with the Joneses. Like, it's not about, okay, because he's making more, now we can have more because you're already making the money. It's about the perception of being with a man who makes less than you, or the man being in a position to where they feel it's obvious that somebody know he makes less than you. And a lot of times women, when they are in a situation, they make more than their man, they lead that way to where they're more opinionated, they're more bossy, they're more controlling. And I've heard women who do make more money than, men that they typically date say, you know what, I really don't want to be in that type of situation where I feel like if I don't do this, then it can't get done. So I'd rather just not even deal with dating someone who makes less than me anymore. Just date someone who makes more than me because they feel like it'll change the mindset of that man, as you know, to the point to where they'll have the leadership characteristics that will have that woman wanting to follow their lead. So
And see,
but like, yeah, that's my thing. What's your thought?
we'll see, and this is where it becomes tricky, right? Because you have women who don't want to deal with the man, what they call that dating down or hypogamy. You don't want to deal with the man who makes less than you because you feel like, hey, he's not being a leader, or she feels like, I feel like I'm his mother. You know, they say things like that. But then you have the guy who has the money and he's leading and he's overly assertive. And then you say, well, this guy's leading with his money. He feels like because he has the money. So it's like a catch-22 for a lot of guys. I personally don't believe, I believe that the man should be in a leadership role. I believe that oftentimes when a man looks further down the line than women. I think women tend to be, I don't want to say myopic. I'm trying, not that they're short-sighted, but they see right in front of them, right? They don't see the long view, and that sometimes it requires a little bit of patience, and that you're going to get past all of the hardships. But I think a lot of times women panic. I don't think it helps that women are so competitive, and they're always turning to look at how their friends are doing in relationships or what their friends have, and that's how they judge how well they're doing. Whereas a man could care less. Well, most men, I'm not going to say all men, most men could care less. Once a man is married and his wife loves him and she respects him and the family respects him, that's good enough currency for him, right? He's always going to want to provide more. But if his wife loves him, respects him, then he feels like he have a little bit of leeway. One example, I would always joke with my wife about this. I said, the difference between men and women is that a man could have a pair of shoes or a pair of pants that are considered ugly, but his wife likes it, and he likes it. He doesn't care what his friends think. A woman could have something that she likes and her man likes it, but if all of her female friends dislike it, she's not going to wear it. Yeah, she'll put it to the side. It's like what their friends think have a lot of currency with women. What was your take on that?
That's interesting. I've never heard anyone say that. So I have to kind of think about that one. But I can relate when you talk about how a lot of times women can kind of be more surface. I do believe that. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that kind of has me to be kind of different with my mindset than a lot of maybe women that I've met just throughout my life, as far as how their thought process is in comparison to mine. Mm-hmm. From an early age, I've always been a dreamer, I call it, where I was always looking ahead. And really, I'd say probably more so within the last couple of years, I started not looking so far ahead because I was always a planner. And that's how I ended up, you know, when I met my husband at 19 and identified he was the one for me, it came off of me bumping that up against what I was planning for. I was already in that mindset. So when I seen someone that mirrored what kind of my list was, I'm like, oh, snap. So I think that was favorable for me, that at an early age, I identified what it was that I wanted out of life. Because if you don't identify what it is that you want, how do you know it when it presents itself to you? You know what I'm saying? So you have to have already identified it. So because I had already kind of identified it and had in my head what that looks like, when he came into my life, I was like, okay, here it is. I wasn't like I was just going out in the world blindly. And I think a lot of women, we live just in the moment just because we're just so engulfed in our feelings, and we don't look ahead and think about the future as far as, well, yeah, he's tall, dark, and handsome, but what kind of job he got? Is he going to be able to pay the bills? What kind of father is he? I don't think collectively a lot of women, in particular Black women, really look that far ahead at such a young age, at least. You know, they're living in the moment. They're like, I got all the time in the world. I'm hot. I'm cute. Everybody's checking for me. But as a young girl, even though I had all those things going on for me, I still didn't move as though that was how my mindset was. Like, I knew I was a a PYT. Like I knew that, but it wasn't, I didn't let it kind of control how I moved in life as far as I come across a different man. I'm thinking like, no, I can do better. Now, you know how you got some women, like I said, they'll pass up someone good because they keep thinking, okay, somebody's better is going to come along. I didn't really have that mindset. I just knew what that betterment looks like. So when I seen him, I went with it. I didn't have a mindset of, okay, well, yeah, he got this, and that, but there's this other thing that's missing. So let me just hold off and wait and see, what the next man is going to come to the table with. I think a lot of women maybe do that, even if they don't do it, think it could be like a subconscious thing where they're just in their mind, they're thinking, oh, I can do better. And then so time is going. And then now years have passed. And that's when I say they'll think about the men who they passed up and think about the men who they could have potentially had a life with. And some may even try to circle back around and they learn it's too late.
Right.
And I think a lot of it stems from being concerned about what family and friends, what other people think. Because maybe Mike, who was that garbage man who was checking for her, she thought, as a corporate woman that she was above him. I can't date the trash man because what are my friends going to think? I think Gabrielle Union played in a movie before like that where probably was Daddy's Girls. Yes. And she was a hotshot lawyer. And then she fell for, I think he was a mechanic or something, single father. And she was kind of embarrassed to tell her girlfriends about him and what he did because of his background, even though she loved him, but she almost missed out because of what her friends thought. And then, and it would take, I would say, a day late and a dollar short. Many times we don't get that second opportunity to right a situation. We just have to do better going forward, and I think that's what a lot of women are dealing with right now.
And so now you're making the point I initially made when I say that women care too much about what their friends think, right? I mean, because that's the kind of the example that you're giving with the whole Gabrielle Union thing. And so because they're concerned about their friends, in the movie, she was concerned about her friends, what they would think about him dealing with the mechanic. I remember the movie vaguely. I don't remember it that much, but it makes the same point that I was making as far as, sometimes women care too much what their friends think. And oftentimes I just don't believe that women's friends have their best interests in mind. Like women have things that they have to worry about that men don't have to worry about. Like when I talk about pregnancy envy, sometimes women can be jealous of their friends because they're having a baby and they want to be the ones to have a baby, or engagement envy or marriage envy. These are not really things that men have to worry about. But this is things that women have to worry about. So I don't know. I think part of it, I'm actually impressed with your list at age 19, because to compose such a list at that young age shows a great deal of maturity. And I'm trying to understand where that came from, because the last time we spoke, you said that you really didn't have like married role models. So where did that come from? Because that's not something that most 19-year-olds put together. Yep.
Right. So, and I've shared my story. If anyone's checking in, thank you for joining us. Please like, share, subscribe as you come in. But I've shared my story on the Real Precious channel. If you guys are familiar with her, she's awesome. Go check her out. But she interviewed me on her show, and I told my story, from going back to childhood up until, today, being 18 years married. I came from a family where I didn't see people married. My mother was married to my stepfather maybe about 6 years. By the time I was 14, they divorced. So I was back to, single parenthood. I think he came into my life when I was maybe about 3. And so it was great, when he was around, and then he left. So I got the chance to kind of experience, what it was to be in a 2-parent household versus not. Mm-hmm. And my childhood best friend, she came from a 2-parent household, nuclear family, mom, dad, 2 girls, their children, they had the children together in the marriage. So when I would spend time with her a lot, I'd stay, go and hang out with her at her house, sometimes go to church with her. I noticed that there was a difference between how her home was ran versus, say, my home or family member's home. And it was basically surrounding a sense of stability. I saw stability within their home. Now, granted, I'm sure everyone has their problems and things, but I saw stability and I felt a sense of peace whenever I would be in their presence or in their home. And then I would call myself a dreamer. I watched television a lot. So I would watch shows centered around family shows, all of those hit 90s shows, Full House, Family Matters, Cosby Show. So I was like, hey, I want something like that, because all I had to compare was what I was living. And I felt like I was in a home where my mother was doing the best that she could. But at a young age, I knew, I was keen enough to know that there was other ways of doing things. And the one thing I did learn, as a young girl, is that life is what you make it. And once I became an adult, I can have the life that I wanted. So if I wanted a life of marriage, children, I could have that. So I had put that in my mind probably as early as 13 or 14 years old. So I would think about those things. I thought more about my family life and what that looked like more so than career. I really didn't know really what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to go to college, but I certainly knew what I wanted the dynamics of my family to look like, which consisted of a husband and possibly children, but for certainty, a husband. That was something I was for sure on. And when I met my husband when I was 19, about a couple of months before I turned 20, he had the characteristics that I felt, that I was looking for, that I told myself I wanted in a man that I felt would make for a good husband and a father, which was much of those things that you mentioned and that you would talk to your daughters about. So when he presented himself, I'm like, wow, this is a good man. He has these characteristics, there's an attraction there, but, mainly I didn't really lead with from an attraction standpoint. I led with the moral compass of it, his characteristic, what kind of man he was. Those were the things that mostly those are the things that I mostly paid attention to, where it made a difference for me, because I felt like with who he was as a man, I can have those things that I knew I wanted out of life. I can build and get those things together with him, because it wasn't like he had a lot. He didn't have his own house that he owned. Like, he didn't have those things. It was like I identified someone that I can build with. So I didn't have in my mindset, because at 19, with getting with a man who had already built something, that already built these things. I wanted to get with a man who had a mindset to want to build, to want to build together, to want to have family together. And that's what he had. So that's how at an early age, why I knew, what I wanted, the why, because of my family structure, and then how I came to kind of recognize it. When I recognized it, I'm like, bet, but the thing he tells me how he knew I was the one is because my views, and when I would speak, I would speak with conviction, and I sounded very sure of myself of what I wanted. And he said it lined up with what he wanted. Right. So that was the thing, as I hear a lot of people talk about, is where you have to get in line with that man. I wasn't trying to get in line with anyone. It's just that what I wanted, it lined up with what he wanted. So that goes to show how I was already marriage minded without really thinking or even knowing I was marriage minded. I didn't know what that was back then. I just knew I was a young girl who wanted a family, a home, where I felt safe and where I had, stability in a way that I hadn't experienced. And I wanted my children to grow up in a household that was a bit different than my household. So that's kind of where that kind of stemmed from.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting because, like I said, I mean, there's that list demonstrates a certain level of maturity that you just don't see with a lot of young people, especially with a lot of young women. I mean, from the list that you compose to the fact that you got married at the age that you did, to the fact that you got married and he didn't have all these things yet. And the fact that he was, you said 11 years older than you. Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, the age thing, there are a lot of girls that are not going to do that. With that age difference, they're not, even though in my opinion, I think it makes the most sense. because there's a certain level of maturity that he comes to the table with. We already know that a 21-year-old girl and a young woman and a 21-year-old man, we know that their maturity levels are not the same, right? I mean, would you agree or disagree?
I would agree.
Right. So, so obviously, it would make more sense for the woman to date or look to marry somebody who's a little bit older than her. You know, maybe like 5, 6, 7, 8 years or more, because again, you're dealing with somebody who's at that stage. You know, you said you were what 19, so he was in his 30s.
Yeah.
He was already ready, and the fact that you were at the age that you were, because you were not accomplished at 19 because you're 19, and so that gives him a little bit of leeway. Now, let's say instead of 19, you were 26 years old and you already had a degree and you were working. Well, now your expectation list is going to be a little bit different. The expectations for a woman who's accomplished at 26 is a lot different from a 19-year-old woman. Right?
I definitely agree with that, because at 19, I guess my list, because I was only 19, wasn't so in depth. You know, I was 19, so it was real basic, I guess. So I guess I didn't overthink it because I was so young, versus someone who's 26 who has experienced life more. I think that they're going to have far more probably on their list, because as they say, you know, they've lived life. They've experienced multiple relationships. So they're like, okay, this is what I want. I didn't really have that experience. Like, I was like 1 year out of high school, and I'd never dated anyone, I guess, more than a couple of years, you know, older than me. So that was definitely new. And it wasn't something that I did easily. So I met my husband. My mom introduced me to my husband. They worked together at the time. So it wasn't like Yes. So it wasn't like I just met him on the street. You know, they worked together. She'd have pictures of her girls on her desk, and he would look at the pictures, and, you know, she asked him, you know, hey, you know, which you're at my desk looking at my picture. Which one are you? You know, and he said, hey, that one. And so that's how the introduction came. And my mom thought he was a nice guy. We're from California, so he was from our home state. And she just thought he was a nice guy. So, okay, I'll let him, you know, meet my daughter. And, you know, the rest is history. I think that had it been on my accord, I would have been like multiple girls. I wouldn't have been interested in dating someone that much older than me. Because even when I was dating him, it kind of felt a little funny to where I really feel like it took a couple of years for mentally to kind of get over that idea of him being 11 years older than me. And a lot of it had to do with, because it was a psychological thing. My husband looks really young. So throughout our relationship, no one can see that age difference because he's always looked really young. So even when I looked at him, it's just like, wow, he looks like he's like around my age, but I knew he was older. So it was like playing mind tricks on me. Like, wait a minute, what does this older man want with me? But though he looks so young, you know, so it would kind of, I would say, and so I would make little comments and stuff or crack little jokes with him. But it was because me trying to work through this idea of being with someone so much older. So I would say it took probably about a good 2 years for me to mentally like be full circle, like, okay, I'm good. This man is older than me, and that's okay. Because in the beginning, it wasn't so easy with me just being with someone that much older than me. I will admit that.
So I think, like, listening to your story again, like, it puts things into perspective. So your mom had already vetted him before she even introduced him to you. And so again, like, you're checking off all the boxes as to why it should work, right? So you had the family support. Your situation is unique. And in the age of social media, it's a lot harder now, I think, in my opinion. And I don't know, maybe you can ask balance whenever you get, it just seems like in the age of social media, it's a lot harder to find someone serious because people do a lot of window shopping, or whether it's on Instagram, whether it's on, Facebook. They feel like there's so many options. And as long as people feel like there's so many options, as long as they feel like there's so many options, they don't necessarily feel that sense of urgency to try to settle down. Now, with men, they have a little bit more time to do that. Women don't. Like, you're on the clock. I mean, you know, by the time you're 34, you're already talking about geriatric pregnancy. So let's look at it like this. So from the time you get to, you graduate from high school and you're 18, turning 19, well, you pretty much have 15 years before you start to have problems, right? That you can't. And I know everybody's looking at, well, you know, you can still have kids. I know somebody who had kids at 40. Yeah, we all do. There's always exceptions. But by and large, most people begin to have problems. And not only do they have problems conceiving, but they also have problems with, you know, the different, you know, the older you get, the different number of chromosomes, and you start to have kids with genetic defects, like, you know, possibly like Down syndrome. That's like a real possibility the older you get. And so that poses like another set of challenges. And I know this is like sensitive topics when you start to talk about things like this, because I don't want to discourage anybody, or if someone has a child with Down syndrome, believe me, I'm not trying to say anything negative. I'm just saying that the way you did it is the way it was supposed to be done. And the fact that your mother introduced you to it, because I truly believe more parents should do that. More parents. Because I feel like when you were in that relationship, I think knowing that it was your mother that introduced him to you, and knowing that your mother and other relatives were on his side and they were team whatever his name is, I think it made it harder for you to just throw your hands up and walk away. And so I think for those reasons, I think that is, in my opinion, the better approach to doing things. It's almost like it's not exactly like what do you call it? Like arranged marriage.
Yeah,
but
I
it's
feel like
somewhere close.
it's very close. I mean,
Right.
when I talk about my story, because I actually didn't really even add this part into the interview with Precious. You know, I didn't go into that part of like how we met. I kind of just talked about why I got married when I did and how it went. So I'm telling you, this is my first time on the platform really with talking about how it all began. So yes, I do feel like it's very similar to the arranged marriage, only because it was an introduction. I didn't go out and find him and choose him and all of that. He was brought to me. And then so like you say, he was vetted. So then it's just like, okay, well, he's a good guy. Let's just see how things go. Because I will say at that time when he was brought to me, it was another guy I was dating that was within my age range. And I was enjoying my time with, hanging out with him. But I already knew at an early age that it was just what it was. It wasn't going anywhere. We were just two young people just having a good time. Whereas when I met my husband, when he came along, I seen longevity with that. I seen that this was someone I can build with. I didn't recognize that in the other guy. So it's back to me already knowing what I wanted out of life and me going through life feeling like once I see it, I'll see it. And when I saw him, I saw it. So then I made the decision to no longer date the other guy and just put my focus on the new man that was presented to me, which is now my husband. So I made that decision because I knew, well, this is a solid. So let me just go ahead and in that and focus on this. I've never been that one to toggle between. That's just never who I was, to date multiple people, that just was never me. I was just kind of like an all-in type of person. So if you were somebody I was interested in, you just had my attention. I wasn't kind of sharing myself with other people. I actually quite found it kind of exhausting, for briefly with dating the two, because remember when my husband, when I met him, I was already dating someone. So I dated both of them for maybe a couple of weeks and I'm like, I'm tired, and I told the other guy, hey, I met someone else. So I don't want to date you anymore. I want to date someone. He was like, well, no, I'll still date you. And I'm like, no, I don't want to date you anymore, because I just wanted to focus on one. So he was willing to still date me. And even with my husband, because I was already dating someone else, he's like, okay, if you still want to, figure things out and date the other guy too, I'm fine with that. So they both were like good with me kind of dating them both, because that's all it was. It was just dating. It wasn't intimacy or nothing. Like, it was just dating, getting to know. But I knew early on, I'm like, no, I know which one I want. And I made my decision. So I wasn't just window shopping. I didn't do that. I recognized a good man very early on, and I went with that. So when I look back at my life and I think about all the things I speak on or hear other people speak on, I'm like, wow, I did all those things without intentionally doing them. Like getting married at a young age, recognizing, sitting, like I was doing all those things. I was done. I had my third child by the age of 30. I had told myself early on, however many kids I had, listen, sis want to be done by 30. I just wanted to be done. I achieved that goal. So it's like when I look back on my life, it played out the way I wanted it to, but it also played out, as you say, the way it was meant to, and the way that a lot of people say women should probably aim for it to play out, as far as with early on settling down, identifying that good man, not wasting your valuable years because you think you're going to be young and hot forever. Because that's what happens. We think we're young and hot forever. And I just wasn't that type of chick that was just real into myself like that. I knew I was cute and all, but that just wasn't the type of girl I was. I'm not even that type of woman. I'm confident. I know who I am, but I don't get off on somebody else telling me things about myself. Like, that doesn't move me, but it moves a lot of women, which is why you got the Instagram models and the people who take pictures all the time, because they live for someone telling them or giving them validation. That was never me. So that became favorable for me, because I wasn't going through life looking for validation and having to feel like I was somebody based on somebody telling me I'm cute. All I needed was just my one man. And when I found him, as they say, the rest is history. So now I feel like, fast forward, you got a lot of women who are maybe in their 30s, 40s, and they're still looking for that one. But like I say, I feel like 99.9% of them have already they've had that one before, and they let him get away for whatever reason.
So with your channel, if you don't mind me asking, so with your channel, I know your goal is you are pro-marriage, as am I, and you are looking to promote to women, right? The virtues of marriage, the benefits of marriage. Like, so what do you say to people? Because a lot of young people, especially young women, they are not, and that's no knock against a lot of them, but they're not as mature as you were at 19. So, I mean, you have to think about it. The young kids in this era, this age, they have a lot of distractions. The social media, Facebook, Twitter, all of that, a lot of distractions. So how do you reach people? How do you reach them with your story when they have like so many landmines of like distractions to go through? Like, how do you do that?
So when I find myself talking to the young people in particular, it's typically nieces, within my family. I talk to my daughter already. I mean, she's 12. I've been talking to her all her life. She's very mature. So I feel like a lot of women today, it's like they're having this epiphany, like this afterthought of how they may have wished they had moved differently. Whereas, remember, I said I was always a forward thinker. So that's why my daughter, I talked to her early about what she wants to do, what she wants her family to look like, so she can move accordingly. So what I start by saying, I ask the young ladies to write down what it is that you want. Because if you don't know what you want, you don't know when it presents itself to you. You don't know what it looks like. So let's start there. What do you want out of life? What kind of man, what kind of job is he going to have? Is he going to be a provider? You want children? Identify all those things. Then after you identify all those things, let's talk about how you can go about getting those things. What type of men would you then need to pursue or allow to date you, if they showed interest in you? Is it going to be somebody who's hanging on the corner, who has their pants hanging down their butt? Is it going to be somebody like that? Is it going to be somebody who's somewhere at a college studying, trying to prepare for their future? Somebody who's reading books, someone who's showing interest in in learning, going to the museum, like, because I feel like if we as women identify what it is that we want, the type of man we want, and position ourselves to be in those environments, like I always tell single women, hey, especially the professionals, join a professional group, join an MBA group or something where you're going to meet other professionals. To me, it's like not rocket science. It's really common sense. Young girls, if you're in college, you want to have a certain type of lifestyle. In college, AK, the campuses, everything is siloed with the like the degree program concentration. So if you got your medical students over here, you got your law students over here, your engineers over here, and you have all these clubs. If you've identified what type of life you want, what kind of job you want them to have, to me, it's a no-brainer to go where they're at. Join the clubs. Go into the environments where they're at. It's not that deep. But again, I always say it takes intent, and you have to be intentional. It takes effort. You got to go ahead and say, okay, let me position myself into this place where this caliber of man is going to be, because 9 times out of 10, he's not going to be at the club. He's not going to be at the party. He's going to be somewhere trying to learn, trying to improve his life. He's going to be somewhere practicing something, working on some type of business plan. He's at the library. He's at the museum. He's in an environment that cultivates growth and wanting to learn and improve. And I think a lot of young girls today, they live through social media and the celebrities, and the way I'm speaking, that's not how they speak. They don't speak that way. That's not even the type of man that they are encouraging the women to check for. It's strictly about how much money he got. Can he buy you a Birkin bag? I don't own a Birkin bag, nor have I ever owned one, nor do I desire one, because I'm so sick of hearing people talk about that that's the end all be all to somebody being worthy of your time. A purse? Are you kidding me? Like, it's so crazy, but these young girls are so heavily influenced by that. And someone like me, they're far in between. They're likely to not even meet someone who speaks like me, because someone who's speaking like me is someone who's married, and in most of the families within our community, they're not married, and they dang sure ain't married 18 plus years.
Right. So I want to play devil's advocate for a little bit, because so you brought up meeting them at college, and certain groups, business groups, and the likes. Now, one, the kind of guys that you're talking about probably represent maybe like the 20%. You have 80% of women all shooting for the same 20% of men. When you look at most colleges and universities, especially with HBCUs, the matriculation rate is really imbalanced. The sex ratio is really imbalanced, right? You have 65% women, 35% men. Like in Howard, my daughter goes to Howard, it's like 70-30. And when there's that kind of imbalance and you're dealing with a younger mindset when it comes to men, a lot of those guys are not going to be committed to being in a relationship. They're just not when they have that many options. Because I think there's a consistent theme here. It's like when people feel like they have too many options, it's harder for them to make a decision. The difference between men and women is that men, they can afford to take a longer time to make that decision, to make that decision, whereas women can't. I mean, what do you say to that?
Well, I also believe that you got a group of men and young boys who often get overlooked or passed because they don't, quote unquote, have that swag. So I'm always that one that's telling the young girls, don't be trying to look for that popular and check for that popular guy that already got 20, 30, 40 girls checking for him. Because more than likely that studious guy that I'm talking about, he ain't got a line of girls checking for him. I'm just going to keep it real, AK, because that's not what the rappers like Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion are talking about. He's been overlooked. I see the young boys in my neighborhood, even my sons, his best friends, they're not the typical guys that girls check for, but they're good guys. Girls don't start checking for them until after they've been ran through. And now they're wanting that good guy. And that good guy was like, well, no, you all ran through. You got 4 or 5 kids. They don't want you anymore. So to your point, I feel like you have that group of guys in school at Howard that there's some girls aren't really lined up for them. because they think they're nerdy. They're not hot. They're not a part of the fraternity. They not no Kappa. They not. So you gotta just, as I say, you gotta go back to what it is that you're looking for. And is it something of substance? Is it something of substance? Because oftentimes I feel like that gym, that's that one that they're not checking for. They're not gonna check for him until after he's made it. So I'm always about get in early, identify that guy, because watch, once you start checking for him, you ever hear when they're not hot until somebody else say they hot, So
all the time.
Watch. Little Brian, nobody ain't checking for Brian. But once Michelle start giving him some girl, well, what's going on with Brian now? It be like that. So you're going to have those guys, that girls. So that's what I'm saying. I encourage ladies, women, take a look at them guys that nobody's looking at, because they're there. Don't be so superficial because he don't have the latest shoes on, the clothes on. He don't, got the nicest car. Pay attention to what it is that he's working on. What he's, if he got this business plan, listen to him as he's saying, listen, babe, I want to build this app. I want to change the world. Really show interest in that. Cultivate that, because a lot of the greats, they're with women who were with them before they even had all of that. They're when it was just notes on a piece of paper. You know what I'm saying? So do that. It's okay to build with someone. And that's the message that I don't think a lot of young girls get, that it's okay to build with someone versus waiting for that person that's already established.
Well, that's the thing, is that a lot of people suffer from instant gratification. They don't believe in delayed gratification. Which, again, to me, I think the way you did it makes the most sense in terms of marrying somebody who's a little bit older, a little bit mature, and closer to being more established. Because again, like if you're getting married out of college, at 24 years old, you're not ready, and that's something that the type of support that young kids need. I don't think a lot of us in the Black community do that. Like I went to college at Loyola Marymount, and so it's like 3% Black. This is out in LA, and some of my white classmates, white friends, the ones that were married, lived at home with their parents, and they were married, and the parents were helping them pay for the school. And so I'm looking at all this, and I'm like, the way they do things. White parents, they set their kids up for success. We are quick to like push our kids out and, to have them fend for themselves. And it was something that always stuck with me. Like I always listened to like some of the things that they said, and I'm like, oh, okay. And so I make sure I do that myself. Like my kids, my daughter came back from the military, from the Army. She's in school. So I got two of them in college, both of them getting ready to graduate this year. One at UDC, one at Howard. And, I told him, I said, hey, I would rather you stay home. I don't care about, you don't have to pay me any rent. Just you make sure you just clean up after yourself. Because what I want them to do is I want them to, one, save the little money that they're making from their job. And two, to not graduate with any student loan debt. Because student loan debt is slavery, and in my opinion, and it is it's really destroying a lot of sisters. They don't realize it, but what is it? I think it's like $1.7 trillion is the student loan debt in the United States. That's huge. 1.7.
Yes.
Okay, and the thing is, 70% of that debt is from women. And the overwhelming majority of those women is Black women. So Black women have a significant amount of debt. Some of them, and I don't want to go too far off topic, but I'm just pointing out the fact that why I feel like we need to help our kids. And some of them have a significant amount of debt, 70, 80,000. I know people who have $150,000, $200,000 worth of debt. And they're doing jobs that didn't even require anything more than a bachelor's degree. You know what I
Yep.
mean? And so what ends up happening is they end up having this mortgage, a student loan debt that's equivalent to a mortgage, and yet they still want to live the certain lifestyle to show that they're successful because they went to college and they have a good job. And then they try to get a home and they have a mortgage and they're just barely getting by, and they're older, and guys are looking at them and it's like, hey, you know what, you got a lot of debt. You got a lot of debt. I mean, there's certain things, you know, you can't expect a man to come in and make more than you and then want to absorb all your debt. A lot of guys are not good with that because as men, we've heard so many horror stories, right? You hear horror stories about how a guy comes in, he's a great guy, helps a woman pay her student loan debt, and then afterwards she says things like she's outgrown him or she's tired. Because let's be honest, you know, divorces are primarily initiated by women, right? 80% of all divorces are initiated by women, and finances plays a part of it. We talked about, you know, the hypergamous nature of women. But another thing is just that, you know, they say things like irreconcilable difference. We talked the other day about how Tia Mowry divorced her husband. No infidelity was involved. And then what was Cynthia Bailey? And no infidelity was involved. Well, I mean, when you get married, that is supposed to be a serious commitment. What can be so serious if there's no infidelity, if there's no abuse? What can be so serious that you would just dissolve a marriage just because you're bored?
I mean, I think that the more independent a woman is, the easier, the faster she's willing to bail. So I think, as you talked about the number of educated Black women, you know, they're through, you know, in my family, I'm around them a lot. I'm one, you know, so the difference with me, when you talk about the things that comes along with all that education and things like that, my education was acquired during my marriage. So I didn't go into, you know, wasn't out there in the dating world. And then I'm having all this that comes along with me, and a man had to sign up for all of that. That's when I go back to building, you know, because as I was growing and obtaining degrees, you know, he was there with me. So simultaneously, you know, we were growing our family. You know, I was getting, you know, extending my education. And so it came within the marriage. So it makes a difference. And it looks like, welcome, Shayla Ahava. I appreciate you joining us and thank you for being in the building. She says, hi, everyone. Such truth this day and age. It is a lot different to find a quality person due to social media and other core factors. Vetting is a necessity, a must-have by someone who loves you. 100. So people discount that. So it makes a difference when I talk about growing and building with someone versus you waiting and wanting someone to have already done that. Because as you said, the person who have already done that, they have more options. So they have the choice of, okay, well, do I want to sign up for this with you? And, you know, you're coming along with all this debt, this, that, and the third, versus say in my situation where all that I acquired was within the marriage. So when I was going through it, it was something that, okay, my husband, he knew, okay, you're about to work on this. This is the amount of money it's going to cost. Okay, we still want to do this. Okay, well, yes, we can still do this because this is going to be the game plan. Like, it was someone that I was working with as a team, because a lot of women who are single and who have all that education, they struggle with even being able to buy a home because the debt is factored in. You know, it's a cost, a bill, it's a percentage that's factored into when the lender is trying to determine whether or not you can afford the mortgage. They're going to factor in a percentage of your student loans. So I know a number of women who have gotten caught up in that, you know, where it's just like they're educated, but they have that struggle because it's just them, and it's just a lot. It's more than just having the money, you know, with buying a house. You got the credit, the debt to income ratio. Is layers, is levels to it, as they say. And I think a lot of people don't really stop to think about that. And then they think about these things like it's an afterthought, and it's just like, wow, I wish I would have knew this or moved differently. And that's what drives me to have conversations with my daughter so early on, because I want her to be ahead of the eight balls, with, as they say, to where certain things that aren't an afterthought, where she spent all of her 20s only focused on school and career. And then now she's approaching 35 and she's like, okay, I want a husband, I want children. I can't find anybody, because she had tunnel vision. I think a lot of Black women will have tunnel vision and just strictly work, focus on their education and not really building the family. For whatever reason, they think they can't do them both. I did both. A lot of other cultures do both. The Asians, the white women, they all do both. But it seemed like with us, we don't tend to do both. We either just have the family or we just focus on school.
I think a lot of that has to do with how we raise our girls, right? And we raise our girls to not have trust in men, right? We tell them, hey, when you don't want to put all your faith in the man. You want to be independent. You want to make sure you have an education, and so that's what we teach our girls. And so that's that type of there's no other word other to call it other than indoctrination. We indoctrinate our girls to be so self-sufficient, so independent, that they don't want to rely on a man. They don't want to trust a man. And in my opinion, I think that's handicapping our young women, because if that's your focus, again, like I mentioned this, I think I was on a show with Aaron the other day, and I talked about how when it comes to education, it takes Black students on average about 1.5 to 2 years longer to graduate. So you're talking about 6 years, in some cases 7 years, right? So by the time you get out, you're 24, 25 years old. And then when you go to work, you start entry level, you want to work up, make promotion. You're talking about by the time you get good footing, you're 29, 30. Well, that's kind of old for a woman. That's kind of late. So now you want to start dating, and because you're up against the clock, you're coming across as pushy. You want to hurry up and get married, want to hurry up and have a child. And for a lot of guys, that's kind of off-putting, kind of frightening. Nobody wants to get into a relationship with you and then just rush into marriage, rush into a baby. That's a lot of guys are not gonna want to be up for that.
Which is understandable.
Right. And so the key thing is, the key takeaway from my discussion with you is that the way you did it is a very old school way of partnering up, because it almost sounds like you went through some type of courtship. You went through a courtship with somebody that your mother vetted. Your mother said, this is a nice guy. It's like a throwback to like the old Southern times when they're like, yeah, I know this nice boy, I know his parents, and that kind of stuff is good because you have another set of eyes. If a mother or a father vets a man for his daughter and they feel comfortable with it, then normally it's a good it's a chance that person will be good for. I had a situation where before I ended up at Loyola Marymount, I went to Norfolk State, and I had a girlfriend at the time, and we had fun. It was fun. We had a good relationship. So I went back home to DC for spring break, came back, find out that she was messing with somebody else. And, I got that knowledge, secondhand knowledge. And so, I talked to her, and she said, well, I want to give you another chance. She said, you're too cheap. I'm like, what do you mean I'm too cheap? She's like, you don't take me anywhere. You don't buy me anything. I said, I am a struggling college student. Like, what do you expect from me? I don't even have a job down here because, this is Norfolk State. You couldn't get anywhere in Norfolk without a car. The public transportation system was trash. It wasn't that good. And so what had happened was her mother had encouraged her to do this. Her mother was planting the seeds, saying, you know what, if he can't buy you this and he can't buy you that, you don't need to be with him. So her mother had encouraged him to encourage her to deal with another guy who was buying her all these things, but he was a drug dealer. And so, but that didn't matter to her. So, I mean, fast forward some years later, her sister had reached out to me and we were talking, and she said, you need to call, so-and-so. I don't want to call her name. She said, yeah. I said, well, what's going on? How's she doing? She's like, yeah, she's doing real bad. She done had kids by the guy. The guy he's abusive, went to jail. I mean, and it was just a mess. And so, I had spoken to her. Now I was angry for the longest time. I remember a quote I told her. I said, hey, you will curse the day and damn the hour that you made this decision. You're going to regret this decision. And so clearly she did. And, it was cool. I mean, we had a cool conversation, but obviously I was going in one direction and she had already gone in another direction. But it just goes to show the kind of influence that your parents can have on you. Now here, if you juxtapose these two stories, your mother has a guy that she's watching while she's at work. I mean, she talks to him, she listens to him. She can tell that he's respectful. She can tell that he works hard. So she's like, damn it, this will be a nice man for my daughter. And so she introduces you, to her daughter. And then over here, you have a woman who sees a guy in college and she doesn't have the foresight to see that, hey, this guy's trying to be something with himself. She couldn't think past like what's right in front of her. So in her mind, it was better for her daughter to deal with a guy who was out there slanging in the streets and making that fast money. But in the end, in your situation, you ended up winning. She ended up losing. And that's the benefit of having positive people who influence their kids in a positive direction, at least when it comes to marriage. And I'll end with this note. I don't think that marriage is something that we should go into by ourselves. There should be family influence, in my opinion, unless your family's so dysfunctional that you just don't want to take their advice. But I do think there should be some input with family. I think too many people are getting engaged and married, and the only time the family even gets a chance to meet them is at the engagement party or like right around the time when it comes time to get married. And that may explain, why the divorce rate is so high. I don't know. These are just my two cents, my thoughts on it. But I'll end there.
Shayla Hava says you won't know how to navigate your life if you don't know what you want. Identify it. Absolutely, Sheik. You got to identify. I've heard someone say that marriages, especially when young people get married, like for example, I was really young. My husband wasn't as young, but they say it makes a difference when they have people close to them who are married, who they can seek consult for, when they're going through things, or it's almost like to have an example. So like I said, with marriage, like I didn't have the examples coming from my side, but there were a lot of examples coming from my husband's side. The closest one being my mother and father-in-law. They had been married, many years. So on surface, they were just, to me, the example of just what longevity looked like knowing that, okay, regardless of whatever they went through, they are an example of them getting through it. That's how I kind of looked at it. So I seen like, okay, it is possible. I may not know the work that it'll take, but I know it's possible because I'm seeing it with them. And like I said, they were just one example within the family on his side. There were many, examples, but that was just their lineage and what they come from, just marriage, longevity, men who believed in taking care of homes. If nothing else, I don't know what type of husband they may have been throughout the marriage. But one thing I did come to know is that they were providers. They took care of home and they took care of their children. So a lot of times it comes down to, there's different facets within a relationship, and you got to identify the ones that are most important to you, because there are many things that you can work through. And then there's some that are like deal breakers. So part of that, when you asked me early on, as far as my conversation with the young people, is it goes into like identifying what it is that you want. And then what are your deal breakers? What are things that you're not going to budge on? Like if it's going to be disrespect, you're not budging on someone disrespecting you, someone putting their hands on you. You have to identify those things. So therefore you can stand strong on them, So I learned that early on, and I feel like, those are the things that kind of took me through my marriage, me knowing, okay, my deal breaker is any type of abuse, disrespect. And I can say within my marriage, I've never encountered any of that. But early on, I don't know, I may have mentioned that to him, but with his demeanor, that just wasn't even the type of energy that my husband was coming with. Just like he never had to tell me, okay, I'm not going to have a woman cursing me out or putting her hands on me. He knew that with my energy and demeanor, that just wasn't who I was. So it's almost like we didn't really speak on everything because we were able to recognize just within the nature of one another of like who we were, and to where we know that, okay, this person, I'm dealing with a respectable person, a person that knows how to carry themselves, a man who knows how to conduct himself, a man who's trustworthy, a woman who knows how to conduct herself, who, trustworthy, who can carry herself with, respect and not be a bad look on me as my wife. So these are things that early on we recognize just during the courtship, because I always feel like early on the signs and you see who you're dealing with, but oftentimes we don't want to accept it for whatever reason, maybe because you went through this long period where you didn't have anybody. So when you finally get someone, you're trying to make it work because you don't want to go back to when you didn't have anybody, even if it is dysfunction, and it's unfortunate because you got a lot of people who don't want to be alone. And I always say, if you don't love yourself, how do you expect someone else to love you? If you don't love your own company and you can't handle being alone, how can you look for someone else to come along and to stand you and want to be with you? So these are things to where a lot of it goes back to just self-awareness, understanding who we are as individuals, because I always say when you know who you are, no one else can come and tell you otherwise or tell you differently. And that goes for man and woman. So I think, with my husband, when I met him, he was sure of who he was. And as a young girl at that time, I was sure of who I knew I was at the age of 19. Even though that was young, I could continue to grow. But at 19, I knew who I was, and I wasn't looking for some type of validation. And I think that made sense. I'm not looking for validation. I feel like a lot of girls that are out here just doing the absolute most, they're looking for validation.
Yeah, there's reasons for that, though. There's reasons for that. And part of the reason why a lot of girls are out looking for validations is because they didn't grow up with a father. And, obviously it's not all, but what you have is sometimes you have girls who are hurt that their father is not present or their father is not there. And they grow up only hearing one side of the story. And let's be honest, sometimes mothers don't always tell the whole truth, right? They tell their side of the story, their version, and their version is always going to make them, for the most part, look like the victim, even though the truth lies somewhere in between. And so you have issues with a lot of black girls who have issues with their mothers, right? I mean, I'm pretty sure, I don't know if you have issues with your mother, but I'm pretty sure you had friends who they and their mothers just constantly clashed when they were like younger, teenagers, when the daughter was a teenager. Have you seen that or?
I personally did. I had a friend where, yes, that was her situation. I never witnessed it, but she would talk to me about it. Me personally, I didn't have that situation with my mom, but it was 3 girls, 1 sister, she did. So I have seen what that looked like. It wasn't my direct experience. I actually find that more as a woman, as a grown-up, I clash more maybe with my mom just because I'm able to speak up, and speak my truth, versus when I was being raised, it was kind of like I understood what it was to be in a child's place. So I didn't challenge my mom. I kind of made mental note of things. And then from those things, I decided on, how she was raising us, what I wanted to apply in my life, as a wife and a mom, and what I didn't want to. So I just kind of made a lot of mental notes, I guess you can say, during that time while not speaking up. Whereas as an adult, I'm comfortable enough to kind of speak up, and we talk a lot daily about, just all kinds of things. She watches my content, so she has an understanding. I don't say anything on here that I haven't already said to her already, and she understands that. As they say, always, you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. You pick and choose. What works and what don't. Like if someone's telling you a story or showing you something, it may not be all bad or all good. You pick out of it, what they say, take what apply, leave the rest. And that's kind of how I apply life. I look at everything big picture. I don't just discount someone just because I don't like one thing about them. I look at everything. That's what I've just learned, because to me that goes into cultivating relationships. And it's not really so much about them, it's about me. I feel good, I feel better when I'm basically not just being open-minded about things and not just being completely turned off by people just for one thing that they may have done that kind of rubbed me the wrong way. Because I'm a person, I like to dig deep and to understand why somebody's the way they are. So it helps me to, I guess, have patience for them, because a lot of times it's not about you. This energy that they're giving off is not even about you. It's about just something they went through. So it's misplaced, anger, resentment, whatever it is. So I've come to know that just since I've been an adult, and it has softened my heart to where I have a place for people in a way that maybe I didn't before, because I came to better understand that, okay, this person has issues that are deep rooted, that goes way back, and it has nothing to do with me. So I'm not going to take it personal and just wear it and be angry. I can choose to maybe control how I deal with them, when I deal with them, but I can control if I want to feel hardened for them. And I choose to not feel hardened for anyone, because I've experienced that before. And it only makes for you to come off as just an angry person, and your aura is off and your energy is off. And it makes for people not to necessarily jump to want to be around you. A lot of things, it just goes back to us, because I said we control our energy. It'll have an impact on the type of people that gravitate to you, So instead of focusing so much on, okay, what was AK doing, or why is he doing that? I put more focus on me, because a lot of times what I've come to learn is when I put my focus and my attention on me, all those things around me start to fall in line and closer to what it is I want it to be. Because at the end of the day, all we can do is control ourselves. And it can be exhausting trying to control. I think we've all experienced it at some point in our life where we try to control a person or something that we can't. And then if we're lucky, we come to realize that you can't do that, and that never works, and we stop doing that. But you have many people who still go through life trying to control things, trying to control the outcomes, and that's just not the way life works.
Yeah, and again, I think that a lot of that comes down to upbringing. Your upbringing, like if you have a controlling mother, tendency is you'll grow up to try to be either controlling yourself or end up getting in a relationship with a controlling person. So I think a lot of our problems has to do with upbringing, the bad decision making, that a lot of us engage in. Again, also has to do with our upbringing, and I think that's something that we need to further explore. Because when we talk about problems in the Black community, we talk about the problem with men. We talk about, racism, but we don't talk about our upbringing and how the fact that so many of us are, being raised by single mothers, and some of the values that were instilled in us in the past are not being instilled in us today. It's just simple things like, say, for example, you have kids that call grown-ups by their first name. That is my biggest pet peeve. It bothers me to no end. I just don't think, that's just me personally. I'm big on respect, and I think that you should always show deference for your elders. I think that, if you have a problem calling someone Mr. So-and-so or Miss So-and-so, then put brother or sister in front of it. Call him, call me brother AK. Call you, sister Lashik. But you have to know that the two of you are not peers, because like once you get that feeling that you, and like let's say like a 14-year-old girl, and Lashik, she feels like she's your peer. Next thing you know, she starts cursing in front of you. Next thing you know, that's how you invite disrespect. But a lot of these things started to happen when you had the rise in single motherhood. And I'm not trying to knock single mothers, but these are some of the things that happen, because when fathers are in the home, you're not having children calling grown-ups by their first name, or children cursing and acting out in front of other people.
Yeah.
If I'm making this sense.
Yes, because I come from probably like 3 generations of children calling their parents by their name, including like 3 generations: my generation, my mom's generation, and then my grandma's generation, like that I know of, where we called our mom by their name. And as much of, the reasons that you pointed out, as far as with having children like at a young age, my mother had me at like 16 years old. So she was very young. So she grew up calling her mother by her name. So, and then I learned from my grandma that she grew up calling her mother by her name. So it was just crazy how you see a generational thing stemming from just these different reasons, much of probably what you talked about, because I think I had one friend who also called her mom by her name, but she wasn't being raised by her mom. She's been raised by her grandmother. I've always been raised by my mom. And, but I believe it just stemmed from just my mom being a child with having children. And then she grew up calling her mom, just kind of like learned behavior, but in the generation with my generation and all of us that have children, none of our children call us by their name. So it's broken. My generation broke it, but there was 3 generations before that did it. So I knew that, okay, when I became a parent, and, I have a sister who's a parent, we both knew, okay, now this is not going to work for us. So, but we also wasn't parents at such a young age also. So it just makes a difference. And a lot of it comes down to your mindset. Do you want to change? Because it's easy to fall in line like the generations that was before me. You just fall in line and do what the previous generation did. But if you're intentional about changing and wanting to do something different, then that's what you'll do. But I always say it's easier to fall in line with the masses. It's harder to be different. So I recognize that what I've done and how I move, I recognize that it's very different, but it's different because I was intentional about it being different, not because I followed suit with what everyone else was doing. Because if I followed suit with what everyone else was doing, for one, I wouldn't be married. My life would look very different. So I just was always just intentional. And that's what I speak about. And I speak to ladies in particular, the importance of being intentional about what you do and not just be out here just moving along, and just not knowing what you want. Like, you have to stop and really think about what it is that you want. And then from there, think about how to go about achieving those things. So it's a process, but it also takes work. And many people don't want to put the work in because it takes effort. Sometimes it's painful. You're stopping to acknowledge some things that maybe you don't want to acknowledge or deal with. It's layers to it, but in order to get to that better place, it's necessary. There's no way around it. You have to do it. You have to put in the work. So I just chose to put in the work to do something different and take a chance, because that's what it was. Because it wasn't like I grew up really, really seeing it that closely. I took a chance on just doing something different, and it worked for me. And my family, they all love my husband. They love me. They look up to us and are very proud of what we're doing. We're that example. And when I get in rooms with them and get in environments, it always eventually comes up with relationships. They'll ask me about, my content, my channel. Like, they're really proud of what I've done. And I think that, you know, my mom, my aunts, they all were doing the best that they could. So I view it to where you do the best you can, but if you want to do something different, you have to be intentional about it, and you have to be willing to put in the work to do something different, because more often than not, it's not going to be simple. You know, it's a chance that you take. But thank you for supporting Veronica. She says, great show. Yes, I appreciate it. So we got to move with intent, AK. That's all I preach over here. You know, if you want to be married, it goes beyond you just saying, I want to be married. The next step is, okay, what does a wife look like? Let me start by looking at some people who are wives. How long have they been married? What kind of characteristic or attributes do they have? These men who aren't married but say they want to be married, what are they saying they're looking for in a wife? You know, are you seeing, you know, what they say, a common denominator, like these certain characteristics that they all say, you know, she needs to be this. Like, if you're hearing that over and over again, I think a lot of times we get so stuck in wanting to change the wheel because we don't like something. Just because we don't like it don't mean that it ain't like, okay, yeah, you don't like that men are visual and they want somebody to talk nice to them. That's not going to change if that's what they want. It's either you're going to conform or you're just going to be good with being by yourself. It's simple as that. Because you complaining about what it is a man want is not going to change anything. It's either you conform to become that, or you say, you know what, I'm good. I'm just going to be, you know, and chill over here, and I'm just going to be by myself. It's up to you. But what I don't understand is those who complain about what the man say they want, but then say, well, I'm good. I'm just going to be by myself. Well, clearly you're not good because you keep complaining about what this man want because you're waiting for him to change what his list is or criteria is, opposed to you adjusting. Because 9 times out of 10, that behavior that you need to adjust is something very negative and toxic.
Yeah, and the thing is, I think a lot of these women just think that men are supposed to accept them no matter what, no matter bad attitude and all, that a man is just supposed to accept that. And you know, if you were to ask a woman, okay, if a man had a bad attitude, would you accept him? Chances are she would not accept him. So we live in a time and place where women are inflexible in their demands, but they expect men to be flexible with what they want. So women are allowed to have standards, but men are not. And this is part of what a lot of men complain about. When we talk about, you know, when it comes to the women, there's a lack of fairness. It's all about what the woman wants, and that's it. There's just total disregard as to what a man wants, you know. And I don't think we talked about it the other day. It's not easy. It's not difficult to satisfy a man.
I don't think so. Yeah, as a married woman of 18 years, I don't think so at all. Men are very simple, basic, like they're really simple. And I always say, if you stop and talk to a man, like, and ask him questions, they'll give you the answers. It's just up to you if you want to listen to them and hear them out. Because anyone who knows me, I will sit and ask questions, pick your brain. And I find that men so easily, they'll answer my questions, because I always say, ladies, if you want to know, ask, don't assume. And a lot of times they assume or don't want to ask because they're afraid of what they may hear. So they are rather not even go there, or they feel like, well, if I ask him, he's going to think that I'm, you know, I'm this or I'm that. No, I don't believe in just going on assumption for anything. Like, if you want to know if you're together in a relationship, stop and ask. Don't assume, because you can admit there's been women who have assumed they've been in a whole relationship with a man. And in his mind, we just kicking it. We're not in no relationship. I never told you was my girlfriend. Well, I thought, you know, since I would come to your house, and so I don't ever feel that anybody, man or woman, should assume. Have the conversation, put it out there on the table, talk about it. If something's not working for you, let it be known. Just don't keep going just because you are afraid of, okay, I don't want to make him angry, or I don't want to make her angry. Put it out there on the table early on, because no need in wasting one another's time. Learn early on if you guys are compatible for one another. I found a stat I want to share with you that I was kind of surprised about, where it talked about when it comes to divorce, that most divorces take place in couples who are 50 years old and older.
Yeah.
That like twice as many. Were you aware of that? And what's your thoughts on that? I found that kind of interesting.
Yeah, they call that what is it, the gray divorce or something like that. Whereas people get older and the kids are grown, they want to go their separate ways. And I think part of the issue is that people are not friends. I mean, like some couples are not really friends, and they haven't really done any work to develop a type of friendship or a type of bond. You know, it's just you know, this is my wife, this is my husband. You know, we have our kids together, and that's that. And the only thing that's holding them together are the kids. But at some point, the kids are going to leave the nest, and when they do, what do you have keeping you together? And that's why it's important. It's important, you know, and I mentioned this on Aaron's show the other day. No, excuse me, yesterday. That you should be friends. You should be friends with your spouse, because that's what's going to keep you together. It's much harder to leave a woman that's not just your wife, but is also your best friend. It's much harder to leave a man who's not just your husband, but also your best friend, right?
I agree. I agree with what you said, because I forgot about that, because I am aware of that, because I used to wonder, okay, how do people be married 20 years and get a divorce? So you just kind of reminded me of that as you were speaking, after I kind of threw that stat out, that, you know, when people become empty nesters and the children are no longer there, is what I call, that can be oftentimes a distraction. Because oftentimes I've seen couples to where when the children are there, I'm like, wow, I wonder where this marriage is going to go once the children are grown and gone, because you can see the evident disconnect there. And the thing that I always prided myself on, as far as with my marriage, is that my husband and I, we are truly friends. We actually like each other. We talk about the things we used to do before we had children, the things we'll do after we have children. We just talk about now the time, the money, the things that we're going to have when, you know, our children are grown and gone, and it's just us. And it's almost like it's just another phase of our life, things that we can just get excited about, with, like, versus it's like, okay, what are we going to do when the kids are gone? We're not that couple. We are not going to be that couple over there just looking crazy because we ain't got nothing to do because the kid's grown. I'm boohoo crying. I'm going to tell you right now, that's not going to be me, because my husband and I, we knew what life was like before our children. Our relationship, it started, our marriage come first. Our relationship started before then. So we had a life before them. So once they're grown and gone, it's like, to me, I look at it as though we're going back to our early days, our early courtship days, you know, where we're traveling and we're doing all these things that we used to do before we had to be concerned about babysitters or daycare money, additional airplane tickets. It's like we're just going to revert back to those times. But I think when you have a good relationship with your spouse, you can do that, and you, versus being that couple where you're wondering, are we going to survive? I worked with a woman before. She said after they dropped their second child off at school, you know, she was so happy they got the son settled in, and on the ride home, he says to her, I don't know what you're smiling about. I want a divorce. Literally driving from dropping the son off at college. And she was so surprised, to where, I don't know what her marriage was like, but she didn't see that coming. So, but he was like, yo, I want a divorce. And so she got a divorce, but he literally did it like after they got that second child off and settled in college. And I just found that story to be so crazy.
Yeah, that's what that sounds like to me, is that somebody has been holding on to a grudge for a very long time. And I think part of the problem is that, you know, some couples, man, they don't communicate well with one another. And I know, I think Aaron said something to the fact about, I don't know if, I don't want to misquote him, but I thought he said something about men need to do a better job with communication. And I actually disagree. I think women need to do a better job at communicating. I think women communicate well with other women. I think when it comes to men, I think they do a very poor job of communicating, because I feel like women often feel like when it comes to men, that they're not going to be heard, that a man feels like he's better than them. So there's a certain, in my opinion, this is just my opinion, inferiority complex that comes into play. And so there are like 4 issues with communications which often leads to divorce, right? So in communication, you have escalation, invalidation, you have conflict, withdrawal, invalidation, escalation, invalidation. There's avoidance, and there's 4 of them, and I can't think of the 4th one right now. And so what happens with escalation is you may be talking to a woman, and then she, for whatever reasons, feels like you're not listening to her, so she raises her voice, and then you raise your voice, and then all of a sudden you got a shouting match over something that was very, very small and that did not even warrant that type of argument. And then the next thing is you have invalidation, where a man may listen to his woman's concerns or his wife's concerns, but when he has concerns, they just it may just be dismissed. And, you're supposed to just man up and just take it. And so what happens is men sometimes end up just shutting down and just giving a woman whatever it is, because he just don't feel like being bothered with it. Because when it comes to men, that old saying holds true, that an ounce of prevention is better than a pound of cure. A man can only argue so long before it turns physical. And so because he doesn't want to be physical, he just lets the woman just have whatever. And so if there's a relationship where a man doesn't feel like he's being heard, then at some point he's just going to want to just get away from it all. And
so I have a question. Would you say that oftentimes that can maybe be rooted in the level of respect that each person have for one another? Or would you say it wouldn't have anything to do with respect? Because I don't like with that back and forth that you just described. I haven't had that with my husband during our relationship. We will disagree, but as far as it becoming like the shouting match or us having thoughts that, okay, you just don't listen to, like, I wonder, I think I've gotten better as I get older. And I think the reason why I've gotten better is that it stems from a respect level that I have for my husband to make sure that he's heard, to make sure, okay, I'm not over talking him. I may have been guilty of doing that before, where maybe he couldn't get his point all the way out. If I pick up that, because a lot of times I speak fast, so like he speaks kind of slow and I have this thought and I want to get it out and he maybe wasn't finished. I try to be cognizant of that when we're talking, to not over talk him, because sometimes it's not me thinking he's wrong. I might thought he was done or something, or I'm just trying to rush to get to respond. And sometimes I'll catch myself and kind of stop, to let him get it out. And that's rooted in like a respect thing. So I'm wondering, is it respect that plays a part in this?
That could play a part, that could be a part of it, but I think it's largely, I don't know if it's just a respect thing. I just think it's just how it is when men and women talk to each other, because women won't do that to other women because they know that a conflict will arise. But if you do it to a man, you know that he's going to have to stand down. And so I think with some women, they do it because they can. On my show, my channel, initially we started off with both men and women being on the same panels, but it got so crazy that the women would just overtalk the men and just constantly interrupt. And so I just realized that, okay, it's better to have 2 separate shows, one all women, one all men, and then bring them together after we're already aware of what their positions are, right? And so that was the formula, and that tended to work. But the issue, it wasn't that the men were over talking the women or the men were interrupting the women. It was that the women were constantly interrupting the men. And so it's a thing that I believe that women feel like when it comes to men, they feel like, oh, the men are not listening to us. Even if the man is listening to you, men are listening to you. They hear what you're saying. But if you don't agree with my opinion, then you feel like you're not being heard.
Yeah, I understand, because I will admit that, when me and my husband are talking, it's really not really any instance where he's over talking me. I will say that, like, I can't think of a time where he's over talked me, but there's been plenty of times where I've over talked him, but I don't do it intentionally now. Like I just, it's just me rushing, and I'm just quick with it, with just how it's coming in my mind, is not to be rude to him. So when I see that, I do try to catch myself, and because I know he can kind of shut down and want to back away if I do that. So it's me just being conscious of me and how I communicate. So I think women are guilty of doing that with, I think, talking more than we listen, and just wanting to be right. I think women more so than men have this need to be right. I think that's just women, so it just comes down to how we navigate through that, because I still have that in me, but I try to be conscious of that, when I'm in conversation with men, with cutting them off. I don't know. I try to fall back. And if I see that I'm doing that, I try to kind of step back and to try to stop instead of keeping it going. So I try to be more self-aware as I'm getting older. And I think there's a lot of women who just aren't doing that. They're just like, it is, they're not, it's the self-aware. They're not self-aware. They do it. They're like, oh, well, so what, and make excuses for it. Whereas I'm not really one to live in the excuse lane. If it's something that I know that I do that's not something that's sexy or attractive, I try to become more conscious of that, to try not to do that. And that's just me, as I try to always work to become a better version of me. And I think that has helped with my relationship with me, the accountability piece and the desire to want to be better and to do better. And it's important for me, if I know something doesn't make my husband feel good, to not do that, to care about how he feel about that and not be dismissive, because I feel like that's a form of respect, to be, by showing that I care about what he says or thinks. That's respect. So I pivot, if it's something because I don't feel like he tries to change me. So if he is expressing something, I know that it's out of a best interest. It's reason, it's safety. I trust that, and I move accordingly. So I think, again, it goes back to just the level of trust that I have in him, that he will not lead me or guide me into something bad. He's always there to protect me. So if he's saying, hey, you probably should do this for this reason, I trust that. And then, but I know a lot of women don't trust in man because they've never experienced having a relationship with a man who's been trustworthy, to their standards, I guess.
Yeah. Again, it all goes back to upbringing. And if you grow up in a fatherless household and your mother's telling you horror stories about your dad, then you're going to have trust issues when it comes to men. And you're going to be raised to be fiercely independent, fiercely strong. And a lot of women feel, a lot of black women who feel like they're independent women, they feel like being strong means always winning the argument or always winning the exchange. And all you end up doing is painting yourself out as this belligerent person who's difficult to get along with, who's difficult to talk to. And it just makes people just not want to deal with you. I don't want to deal with a woman who's always, you can't be belligerent and always want to be right and over talk people and then get upset with the label angry black woman.
That reminds me, before the show, you and I got into a conversation about, the content creator Kayla on the Lapeef network, and I'm in the chat a lot of times and I'm just looking and seeing what people say. And pretty much what you said, like 90% of the men in there, those are the sentiments that they have when it comes to her. And it's consistent. I don't watch the show consistently, but when I go to watch the show consistently, that is the comments. So it comes down to when I feel like sometimes we have to stop and really do a self-assessment if we're hearing something repeatedly over and over about us that's negative, where it's not just coming from a one-off situation, but if you're seeing like many people, in particular the opposite sex, saying something and you desire to be with and married to someone of that group, to me, it makes sense to really stop and take in what it is these people are saying or what their thoughts are of you. Because like I said, you can't spend your energy trying to fight the system. You know, the system is what it is. And if the system says, okay, these are the rules, these are the requirements in order for you to have this, you either conform or you say, you know what, I don't want that. I'm gonna go do something else. But I don't believe that you should bitch and moan about the system, but then over here say, well, you know, I don't care, I'm not doing that. Okay, well, stop complaining and just be good with just, I guess, being single, because people are going to tell you what it is that they're looking for or what they want. And if you don't want to conform, that is your business. I'm not even mad at you. I'm just saying that this is what it is. And clearly it's not changing. So you want, it's either comes down to a whole system change or you change. Mm-hmm. And the reality of it is that you have to change, because a system is not going to change. A system is what it is. Mm-hmm. You know, that's just, you can apply that logic with anything, that the system is not going to change for an individual person. It doesn't work that way. You conform to it or you choose not to, period. And I think that that's the situation with a lot of women, is that they spend a lot of time focusing on the system because they're pissed off that it's not changing for them. You know, it's just like, I told you I didn't like it, but these other 350 people are like, so what? I don't give a damn. You know, you're just one person, you know? So I think that's what it kind of comes down to. And I'm like, people, and I think Aaron had went on Clubhouse one day. He said he was on the system on there, and he was kind of speaking like this, like, listen, you can't get pissed off at the system. It is what it is. He said he felt like they were putting more energy in trying to go against the system and be mad about it, instead of trying to pivot and adjust to adapt. You know,
it's what we do. I mean, I was on a show where they were talking, you know, and there was like some hostility towards capitalism, and they wanted to blow up the whole system and start all over. When I asked them, I said, well, what do you want it? What would you like? What system would you want in its place? They couldn't come up with an answer. And that's, to me, sounds similar to what's going on here. Well, you don't like what's going on. Well, ideally, how would you like it? Give me the system that you want. They've never even given any thought to it. So rather than trying to start over from scratch, why don't you just try to be successful and exist within the existing system? It seemed like that would be a lot easier to do.
Yeah, that sounds like logic. It sounds very logical. And I will say that men, to me, are more, which I don't think many will argue, men are more logical. You know, it's just how men are. And women, you know, we're more emotional. I always felt that I had more of that logical characteristic, like of a male, you know, so that's why I moved differently, just because it's been from a logic standpoint ever since I can remember, not heavily on emotion, all the way to me identifying my husband. That was logic, you know, it was logic. It was heavily a thought process, me thinking about that. And I know that a lot of women, they don't make decisions off of that. It's primarily off of their emotions. So I make more decisions off of logic versus emotion, which is kind of not the norm for your average woman, which is why I move differently. So I speak to women about, that's when I say being intentional, because that's logic. That's you actually taking the time out to really think about something, develop a game plan, identify what it is you want. Almost like in line of a SMART goal, you know, apply it to like when you're in business, you're at your job. It's the same thing, you know, is something realistic? Is it realistic that an entire system is going to change? Or is it more realistic for you to try to get in line with what this system is saying the requirements are? But there's always that option of you choosing to say, you know what, I'm going to pass, which you have that right. But my thing is, if you're going to choose to pass, to me, the complaining should stop, because you're saying you're going to pass. But when I hear people complain, that lets me know you're not done. You're upset that the system hasn't conformed to you. And who's to say you're the right way? You know, what they say is strength in numbers. So if more numbers fare on this system than you, then sis, it's not going to change for you. So you're either just going to be by yourself, which a lot of women are, or you're going to get with the program. And a lot of men are coming with that energy like, well, It's more single women out there than men. So you either get with the program or you just be by yourself. And the program is not that bad. It just depends on who you're lining yourself up with. All men aren't the same, just like all women aren't the same. Align yourself up with someone who has the values of you versus focusing on the system in its totality. Focus on, as Aaron said, that you only need one person. Focus on finding your one person versus trying to change a system.
Well, I think the issue with a lot of women is that they just don't want to feel like they lost. And they feel like if they have this checklist and they can't get the majority of what they want on the checklist, then they feel like they lost and they're not going to be happy. And it's, again, conversely, men are a little different. I mean, if I have a list of 5 things and I get 3 of those 5 things, I'm good. But you have a lot of women who, if they can't get 4 or 5 of those, they're just not going to be happy. And I think the problem with marriages is that women are constantly chasing happiness, right? I mean, what makes you happy today may not make you happy next year or the year after that. I mean, women change their mind all the time. You can have a guy who is funny and he makes her laugh, right? And she loves that about him. 2 years from now, she's like, he all he does is joke. He's not serious. 1 year you can like a guy because he works hard. Next 2 years from now, you may not like him because he works too much. He never has time for you. So there's always something, and it's always just, the woman's mind it changes quite often. And this constant chase of happiness, it just doesn't really make sense, because like happiness is fleeting. It comes and goes. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, that's why I definitely say, it's more than love. It's more because our emotions, they change. That's just the innate nature of a woman. We change. And I think that once we come to recognize that and realize that and accept that that's what it is, we can see that we may put more weight onto man than really what need be, because it's impossible for you all to really conform to us throughout all these emotions. And I know what it's like from experience, just being as a married woman looking for my husband to conform with all these things. But it took for me to become aware, my emotions are all over the place. They change. And for me to realize that I hold the keys. And at the end of the day, how I feel at any given time is controlled by me. And as I talked about, since we've been doing this live stream, that I've learned to, instead of focusing on the outside or say what my husband is doing or not doing, I put focus on myself. Because when I put focus on myself and trying to better myself and improve myself, I come to see that all else things kind of start to fall in place, kind of like energy, so that has worked for me, because I think far too many people spend a lot of time pointing the finger or complaining about what someone is or isn't doing, and not putting enough energy into their own development, their own growth, improving themselves. I have a lot that I can improve on. I got enough to keep me busy than to be over worried about my husband. I will say that, but sometimes I have to kind of stop and, do that self-check to be like, okay, since you got your own stuff you can be worried about, don't be worried about what that man is working his nerves or what he ain't. Worry about your, it's a little meme that going around, a little girl. She said, worry about yourself. Worry about yourself. So I kind of tell myself, worry about me. And that's what I do. I got so much going on. And, I let my husband do his thing, and he support me as I do my thing. And when he sees me and as I work hard, it becomes a motivation. We motivate each other. So that's something I see, him motivated to pick up, do different projects, different things, because he's seeing I'm all over the place with doing all these different things. And look, he's doing that without me constantly, nagging, but in his ear, hey, you need to do this, you need to do that. He's wanting to do it because it's like, oh, okay, well, she's over here doing that. Let me be over here doing this. So, we have more control, I think, ladies, than what we think we do. It all goes back to the mind at the end of the day.
I agree.
So yeah, this has been definitely a great topic. I definitely always appreciate you coming over here, AK, because we have really, really good conversation. And at the end of the day, it takes more than love. It's layers. So we as women, we have to factor that in when we're getting to the relationships in our marriage, that it's don't just be focused on in love. Oh, I don't feel the butterflies anymore. I'm not in love anymore. Look at, still what kind of character is this man, this person still exhibiting? Are they still someone that you can be proud to be married to? Are they still a great father? Do they still show up for you? Are they still a protector and a provider? Because at the end of the day, those are the things that really sustain the relationship. Do they still respect you? Do they still take care? Like those non-superficial things. Because if you're worried about love and you're saying, oh, I don't feel this way anymore, sis, I guarantee that's how people be married multiple times. If it's not, as a result of becoming a widow, is because it's our emotions. It's like, oh, I don't feel that feeling anymore. Like I've been there before. But the difference with me is that I checked myself. And I came to realize what it was, that it was something within me that I was just looking for my husband to just be conforming to all these different emotions when he's pretty much still the same guy. He didn't change. I changed, but now I'm looking for him to change because I changed. And is that really fair? Should somebody be expected to change because you changed?
Right.
Like, when you really stop and think about it, because we change so much. And if I get with someone else, I'm gonna change again. And that person's not gonna change and conform to that. So what? I'm gonna leave and get, like, it can be a never-ending cycle if you don't really stop to realize what that is. Like it really can be. Like I've seen it.
Right. No, I definitely agree. I think, like I said, I think you're on to something great. I think you have a great platform. I can't wait to have you over on my channel. I'll probably reach out to you when we get offline, or talk to you more about it offline, because I definitely like to have you on. Now, I don't just talk about relationship. I talk about things outside of just romantic relationships, but definitely great to have your perspective.
Sure, I would definitely love to on YouTube, I talk about relationship stuff. But as I say, when I first started, I was a content creator. I covered celebrity gossip. So that was just a bunch of, different types of topics. So the relationship aspect is something more fairly new with me talking about, since, the people on the street say it's something that's needed. So I'm like, okay, so I decided to, come out here and speak to people about marriage, because there's a lot of women who do desire it. But I do have a lot to say about, other things, other topics. So I definitely would love to be able to join your show, your panel. Just hit me up, let me know what you got going on, and we can try to see how we can make things work, with our schedule. But I enjoy talking with people who just come from different walks of life, who think differently, because it allows for me to kind of expand my mind and be open to other perspectives. And I think that we as people, that's growth. And I think as women, we should be open to doing that more and listening to the things that men have to say. Because if you stop and listen, they'll tell you what they want and what they're looking for. And you don't have to feel like you're lost or you don't understand. Just stop, be quiet, and listen. They're going to tell you. And that's why I like to tap in on different males' platforms. And then I'll bring some of that back to my platform, because I'm like, ladies, they're talking. This is what they're saying. Because in my mind, I know what a lady wants. But I don't know what you as a man want, AK. So that's why I have to go and do check-ins and listen to you and be like, wow. So it's like with anything, you got to study it. It's no different. The way the relationships, it's just like wanting to learn how to cook or make a cake. Like you got to go and learn it and seek it out. And I view, with relationships and men, the same thing. Go to where they're at, have those conversations, and I guarantee you're going to learn something. And you may not hook up with that person, but you're going to learn something new, and it's going to be a takeaway to something that you can go and apply to your life. So we just got to get out of our way and just be open to hear out what the other person, what the other group has to say, and just have those conversations. And it don't have to go left, or you don't have to be yelling and all that, but we are capable of having conversations, and we don't have to be aggressive. And I know a lot of men get turned off with aggressive women. So that's something that I'm conscious of also with my delivery, to not come off as being aggressive, because I know what that looks like. And oftentimes people shut down when they're in conversation with someone who comes off as aggressive, and it ends the conversation. So we're not learning, because the conversation has been, shut down, because the other person is like, okay, I'm scared to say something. So we have to just be conscious of our delivery. I like to say, read the room, recognize, what type of person this is that you're speaking to. What is their background? Will they respond to you speaking in that type of way? Because different people respond to different tones, language. You have to kind of study and just adapt. You have to adapt. You can't communicate with everybody the same. I say you can still be yourself, but sometimes you have to adjust maybe how you go about delivering your message, just as you will with children. You'll speak with children a certain way, you speak with adults a certain way. You speak with women a certain way, you're going to talk to a man a certain way. You're not going to speak to everybody the same. And it's not that you're changing, you're adjusting, your message. So therefore you can meet that person where they are, so the message isn't missed, because it's more important that they get the message right. To me, that's what's most important. Yeah, that they get the message. So yes, I appreciate you. AK, can you please tell the people how they can find you?
You can find me on YouTube at www.youtube.com/AKOnFireTV. On Instagram, you can find me at The Real AK on Fire.
Okay, awesome. And you guys know you can find me on Instagram at chic.speaks, on YouTube, Chic Speaks. And I'm in the process of, I've just created my Facebook page. So go ahead. I'm still, trying to, let everybody know on my personal account that I created a separate page for this channel. But I'm Chic Speaks on YouTube. So definitely make sure you follow me over there, because I will start posting content and things like that on Facebook as well. So I do appreciate you coming over, showing up and showing out on my platform as usual. And I cannot wait to be a guest on your show, AK, because I know, it's going to be awesome. And I know you like to do the panel. So it'd definitely be nice with, speaking to the different people, that I may have not met, but just to learn about, other thoughts that people have as it pertains to just different topics of the things that are going on in our world. And you guys, make sure you like, share, subscribe. My Cash App is $speak50. And again, ladies, if you do desire marriage and you just need help, you're like, listen, I want that husband, but I don't know how to go about doing it. This single life, this dating life, is just for the birds, and I'm just tired. I'm your girl. If you're open to listening, I have a lot of knowledge that I can share on, how to get married and what married life looks like, and how to sustain a healthy, happy marriage. It is possible, ladies. It's definitely possible. So I'm definitely here to help however I can. So I do appreciate you all for joining today's show. It was awesome. And I will catch you all on the next broadcast. Peace.